Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Mr. Timothy by Louis Bayard. Narrated by Matthew Lloyd Davies. Chapter 1. Not so tiny any more, that's a fact. Nearly 5'8" last I was measured, and closing in on 11 stone. To this day people find it hard to reckon with. My sister Martha, by way of example, wouldn't even meet my eye last time I saw her. Had to fuss at my shirt buttons and stare at my chest, as though there were two dew-lashed orbs blinking out of my breastbone. Didn't matter, I've half a foot on her now. She still wanted to be mothering me, and her with a full brood of her own. 6, last I counted. And a well-oiled husband, gone 2 nights for every night he's home. Why would she want more bodies to tend? But she does, and old habits. And let the woman have what she wants. So on this last occasion I dropped to my knees and looked straight at the sky with that look I used to have. It comes back in an instant, and I sang Annie Laurie. And Martha laughed and boxed my ear and said, "Out with you." But I think it pleased her, remembering me smaller, everything else smaller too. The iron brace was bought by a salvager long ago, and the crutch went for kindling shortly after. Quite the ceremonial moment. And all that's left really is the limp, which to hear others tell it is not a limp, but a lilt, a slight hesitation my right leg makes before greeting the pavement. A metrical shyness. Uncle N told me once to call it a caesura, but this produced looks of such profound unknowing I quickly gave it up. I now refer to it as my stride, my hitch stride. A lovely forward connotation that I quite fancy, although I can't honestly say I've been moving forwards, not in the last 6 months. But always better to leave that impression. I never think of the leg, truthfully, until the weather begins to change. I'll know it's spring, for instance, by the small ring of fire just under the right buttock. Fall is the dull, prodding ache in the hip joint, and winter is a bit of a kick in the knee. The whole kneecap sings for 3 or 4 days solid, and no amount of straightening or bending or ignoring will stop the music. It's winter now. The 12th of December, to be specific. A date I am commemorating by staying in bed. I can't say bed rest does the knee any better, but if I lie still long enough, the knee merges with the rest of me and dissipates. Or perhaps I should say everything else dissipates. I forget even how to move my arm. Many years ago, a doctor with violet nostrils and kippery breath informed my mother that the paralysis in my leg would, left untreated, rise through me like sap, up the thigh and the hip, through the lower vertebrae, the breastbone, the lungs, to settle finally in the heart itself, little orphan bundle, swallowed and stilled forever. Being just 6 and possessing an accelerated sense of time, I assumed this would happen very quickly, in 3 or 4 hours, let us say. So I made a special point of saying goodbye to Martha and Belinda, because they were rather nicer than Jemmy and Sam, and I told Peter if he wanted my stool he could well have it. And that night I lay on my pallet, waiting to go, pinching myself every few seconds to see if the feeling had vanished yet. And I suppose after all that pinching it did. Only a matter of time, then, before the heart went. I lay there, listening in my innermost ear for the final winding down, wondering what that very last beat would sound like. Well, you can imagine how alarmed I was to awake the next morning and find the ticker still jigging. Felt a bit cheated, if you must know. And perhaps by way of compensation I've been dreaming ever since that the long-awaited ending has at last come. I dream I'm back in Camden Town, except now I'm too big for everything. The stool, the bed, the crutch. Even the ceiling crowds a little. I have to stoop or lean against the wall. My feet are rooted to the ground. The sap is rising. I've already lost the feeling in my hands. The last draughts of air are being squeezed from my lungs, and my heart is thumping loud enough to wake the dead. And I realised then that the heart doesn't shut down at all. It keeps beating long after everything else has stopped. It's a separate organism altogether. And in a fury of betrayal I grabbed for it, raking my fingers along the ribcage, and my lungs squeezes out one last accordion blast of air. And that's when I cry out. I'm never sure whether I've actually cried out or whether it's part of the dream, but it always leaves me feeling exposed in some deep and irreversible fashion. So I must spend the next 5 minutes inventing plausible excuses for the neighbours who will come pounding on my door any minute demanding an explanation. The neighbours never come, of course. I have the great fortune of sleeping in an establishment where loud cries are part of the ambience. Indeed, in Mrs. Sharp's lodging-house, one might scream murder several times in quick succession and elicit nothing more than indulgent smiles from the adjoining rooms. Murder here being simply another fantasy, and fantasy being the prevailing trade. The only person within earshot of me most nights is Squidgy, the droop-shouldered, hairy-eared gentleman with a tonsure of white hair who comes 3 times a week to be punished for the infractions he committed in public school half a century ago. Squidgy normally takes the room next to mine, which gives me the confessional privilege of hearing his sins, delivered in a high, breathless quaver. And then I gave Podgy a page out of my Latin copybook because he's quite hopeless at indicatives. And I saw Bertie Swineham sneaking out to the Grange to bag squirrels, but I swore not to peach. I'm quite keen on the riding boots Simon Bentinck's mother sent him last term, and I've half a mind to pinch 'em, and Willie Robson took me down to the boathouse and showed me his pee-pee. The lashes come between each sentence, unless the instructress is over hasty with her whipping, in which case whole predicates may be sheared off. Fortunately, Squidgy is usually paired with Pamela, a young woman who combines Prussian efficiency with Hindu patience. It is rumoured she was once governess to the family of a deputy cabinet minister, by which personage she was seduced and shortly thereafter traduced. This may well be a fiction created for the benefit of patrons, but she surely sounds like a governess when she's locked in that room with Squidgy.
Somebody hasn't learned his conjugations.
I'm a tremble just listening. Imagine poor Squidgy having to croak out the day's lesson. Amo, amas, oh, no, please, no. One night I got back particularly late and found Squidgy ambling down the corridor, his sins already whipped out of him, his body as naked as the day it came into the world. He was carrying a glass of port and smiling at me like a fellow clubman. "Evening, Timothy," he drawled. His head was inclined with a suave deference, and as he passed I could see Pamela's long red stripes running from the knobs of his shoulders to the backs of his knees, the new lacerations already melding with the old in a raised carpet of livid purple. And in this way I learned that Squidgy had no one waiting home for him, no one who would ever remark on the condition of his backside or even entertain suspicions. "And a good evening to you, sir," I said. The honorific tumbled out quite naturally, a testament perhaps to the dignity in which men like Squidgy are naturally clothed, and a sign that I am, like Pamela, an employee of Mrs. Sharp's. Certainly that is how Squidgy regards me. Many's the time he has nodded my way, commented on the weather, commended me on my peg trousers. We are the best of acquaintances, and we both know full well that if we ever ran into each other in Mayfair he would cut me dead. Which is to say that even if I did cry out in the night, and even if Squidgy did manage to hear me through the crackings, he'd feel no obligation to interrupt his joys on my behalf. But then who would? My few surviving relations, to the extent they are able, Uncle N, of course, Captain Gully. Beyond that, silence. Silence, yes. A fine reason to quit your bed on a December evening, even with the knee still singing, even with the night air catching your breath as soon as you lose it. Keep moving, Tim, towards the noise, towards the light. And no town has more of the same than London in the year of our Lord 1860. London waits for you at every interstice. Come down the stoop of Mrs. Sharp's any time of day, turn right, and the human traffic of Regent Street sweeps you into its tidal embrace. You dodge a twopenny bus and fall into a coffee stall. You scrape horse shit off your shoe. You hear the clocks in the church towers striking the hours and quarters. You see the season's first sprigs of holly gleaming from the storefronts of poulterers. You walk past the plate-glass windows of Oxford Street, the sweet shops and linen drapers and tobacconists, all shining like glazed hams. You jostle with silk-hatted toffs and ladies in crepe de chine, and sailors and financiers and shoeblacks and jugglers and lurkers and nostrum vendors. And oh my eye, do you meet some gay ladies. From 5 in the afternoon to 3 in the morning, from Langham Place to St. John's Wood. A fellow can't even pass from Piccadilly Circus to Waterloo Place without having his virtue fairly laid siege to. The lacquered hand on your hip, the breast against your shoulder, the 13-year-old in pigtails, the bald crone with a moth-worried purple cowl. None of them so nicely dressed, I should say, as Mrs. Sharp's retinue, but all of them ready to do in a pinch. They come from Sheffield and Birmingham and Belfast and Brussels and Amsterdam. They squawk, they coo, they whisper. A great symphony of sex. And we men, we passing men, are just the staves for their winding melodies.
Oh, ain't he handsome? This un's mine, girls. Give us a kiss, love. You sport old sow needs a lick of gin.
I've often thought a blind man could find his way through London simply by gauging the changes in innuendo. Mild through Trafalgar Square, less veiled towards the river.
Care for a fuck? Shall I show you my cunt?
Hear enough of these offers, it becomes almost an unpatriotic act to refuse. And look at me. Mostly able-bodied citizen of 23, organs in working order. As good a candidate as the next fellow. But apart from the occasional back-alley groping, I haven't felt much up to it of late. Astonishing, really. The closer they get, the colder grows the cockatoo. And so I'm torn between hurrying on and staying to apologise because, you see, I do want them to know it's not their fault. No, truly, you look smashing. With your pretty yellow hair and your lilac garter, a man would have to be mad not to go home with you. But by then they've moved on to the next one, and I am left to wonder what has come over me. What has come over me? Not half a year ago my loins were on military alert. I couldn't breathe a woman's scent without swelling. And now, can't even get hard with my own hand. My fingers clamp on like limpets, but no divine spark issues from them. I might as well be making sausage. Some nights, looking for inspiration, I land at Kate Hamilton's night house, just a few blocks from Mrs. Sharp's, or better still at the Argyle Rooms in Great Windmill Street. On the books, Argyle is a dancing academy. But in fact, dancing is merely the thing that happens before the next thing. I'm not much for capering anyway, what with the leg. So if I have spare change, I treat myself to a beer and sit at one of the outside tables. I watch bankers and solicitors in frock coats, whirling with beautiful young birds. The band in the far corner is playing a waltz, Vienna by way of Leeds, and the women, still holding glasses of champagne, rustle their satin dresses and lean their heads theatrically on their escorts' shoulders. The attitude of their necks, the droop of their gloved hands, everything conveys the same message. Oh, it's never been this nice with anyone else. Not Mr. 710, nor even Mr. 830. And the men seem to believe it, as I would too, probably, in their place. There's an arousing conviction to these women. The very stillness with which they carry themselves across the floor becomes a form of copulation. And it all makes me intolerably hungry, without giving me the means to feed. It's a goodly amount of work, you can imagine, being a voyeur. That's why on Saturday evenings I suss out a different sort of sensation. I wander over to the New Cut to catch the Lambeth Street Market.
You want light, do you? Not even heaven has this much light. Every coster in England has his stall here, and every stall has a light, a lamp, a candle, a stove, a brazier. The whole sky aflame with humanity, and a righteous din to match. Who'll buy oranges? Sweet, sweet oranges! Kerchief for 3p. Flounder 3 a penny. Here, more than anywhere else, your classes converge. Buyers, sellers, thieves, gulls. Here is where the day's fog retreats, and the frost drips from the store eaves, and the smell of broiling chestnuts fill the air, and someone's snuff missile whistles past your ear. And then I see my father grabbing a pair of apples from a barrel. For a second or two I'd swear to it on a Bible, that long wizened body bending at 100 joints, pipe stem legs, elbows pointing in wrong directions, narrow ribbon of fat along the hips, hectored air of attentiveness. It's him. I shouldn't be surprised. Wherever I go these days, I see my father, swinging a billy club, laying out meat pies in a shop window, driving a broom down Petticoat Lane, cadging for coins outside the Lord Mayor's house. Most often I see him from behind, which allows him to sprout a stranger's face by the time I get to the other side. Sometimes, though, I stumble across his actual face, staring at me from a brand-new body, looking, if anything, more surprised than I. His eyes glimmer with foreknowledge. His mouth begins to form my name. And then he passes on, this banker, this linen draper, whatever new trade my father has taken up, and he takes it up again. I was standing by the bedroom door when he died, standing with Uncle N, both of us, I think, itching to leave, but not quite able. Perhaps we had a presentiment. I think it was more likely boredom that dug our heels in. That's the sad fact about vigils. They can be terribly boring. Father's had been going on for 6 weeks now, and there was no sign of its ending soon. That particular evening I'd just about made up my mind to leave when, from his chest, a sound jerked free. A bellows draught of air, no different from the others except in how it ended. The quick tapering hiss of a hot iron lifting off a trouser leg. I rushed to the bed, but Uncle N never moved. Didn't have to. Don't be sad, Tim. He's gone to his rest. Gone to your mother and the rest of the angels. And at the time that looked to be the only possibility. There was about as much life left in Father's night-shirted stalk as in a tailor's dummy. Whatever he was had slipped out the door while we were looking the other way. But now I'm not so sure Father had the proper passport for the next world. Why else would he be pushing coster barrows, floating on river ferries, selling cures for corns? Why else would he be looking for me so diligently, even as he pretends not to see me? I left it to Peter to sort through his possessions. The one thing I took was the comforter. I can't say why. Father used to wear it to the office, long ago, in the days of one-coal fires. Wore it on the streets, too. Till the end of my days I shall remember how he looked coming down Bayham Street with the ends of that bloody scarf swinging round his knees, like a deposed king in an ermine robe, I think, in my more charitable moments. Like a blithering madman, I think, other times. The comforter was blue in its original incarnation, but years of street living eventually dyed it a pigeon grey. Mother was always offended by the sight of it, and so I had assumed it had gone the way of other family belongings until I found it again, stopping up a hole in the back of a cupboard. I didn't tell anyone, just stuffed it in my bag and left. Now it lies across a coverlet on the second floor of Mrs. Sharp's establishment. And it does keep out the cold, I will give it that, even where the threads have pulled away. Some things it can't keep out. I find them on my pillow when I wake. Little lozenges of memory. My mother's voice, perhaps, calling me down to dinner. Or the dark lily of my brother's body wafting down the canal. All things of a more recent vintage. One girl in particular, she visits my dreams quite often. No more than 10 or 11, I'd estimate, although guessing her age is difficult because when I saw her, she was lying on her side in an alley off Jermyn Street, stretched out like an artist's model on a chaise. Fully at her ease, I thought, until I drew closer and saw the hands, not flexing as I had imagined, but frozen in place. Talons, smeared with blood, and her head had been ratcheted back, and what else? Grey-blue lips and grey-brown eyes staring back down the alley as though they were following the progress of her recently absconded spirit. 2 constables stood one on either side of her, voluble, blithe chaps in swallow-tail coats and specially reinforced top hats, waiting for another kind of reinforcement, perhaps, or just passing the time, and preoccupied enough or bored enough to admit company. Even if the company was you, silent, bending to study the uncovered form on the ground. Their patter settled like foam on the back of your head. Fancy, though, the neck's clean. 100 to 1 it were a pillow. Come now, Bill, blood on the hands, fighting a pillow, don't be daft. Look who's calling who daft. He'd seen strangers' bodies before and never once stopped. Why should this one have been different? And why this tender scrutiny? Your eyes lapping up everything. The dingy black stockings, torn and blooded round the feet, the black woolen folds of the skirt, the shreds of petticoat, the face, white as sugar, and everything on it flung open like the windows on a cuckoo clock, mouth, eyes, even nostrils, all dilated as far as they could go. And something else, too. A square of skin where the sleeve of her dress had torn away, and through that aperture, the most remarkable sight, strangely accented in the gaslight. Not a tattoo, nothing so mild as that. A brand. The skin not dyed, but blistered, seared, like the flanks of a jersey. And what did you read there? A letter, that was all. 1.5 inches in diameter. G. Except there was more. Beneath the upper loop, a pair of eyes had been likewise burnt into the skin. And those eyes had the strange effect of turning the letter into something quite palpably alive. A bird of prey, that was your first thought. And yet you might have read anything there, a jack-o'-lantern, a cloud-soaked moon. Nothing else, though, explained the animal intelligence with which this single letter quivered. It was 2 months ago I saw that girl, and I don't think a day has passed but that she hasn't exacted some tribute from me, some revolution of my brain. I don't even need to dream her. All it takes most days is closing my waking eyes, and I see everything again, freshly minted. The 2 constables, and the alley with its livid purple shadows, and the rumble of a passing dray, and this girl, opaque and anonymous. And I see that, too, the black G with its ravenous eyes and its orifice. And it seems to me the orifice has the power of speech, but only for people with the power to hear. I am not yet one of those. Chapter 2. First, I made him... No, that his name should be... Mrs. Sharp crumples her plucked brows. Her eyes shrink to coin slots, and her lips encircle the errant sounds. Day. Like the day, does he mean? Yes, exactly. Which was the day I saved his life. Oh, yes, I see. I likewise taught him to say, Master,
and then let him know that was to be my name.
Good.
I also taught him to say yes and no, and to know the meaning of them.
She holds the book very close to her face, like a priest with a missal. The candlelight softens the rather florid henna of her hair, the powdery steps of her face.
I kept there with him all that night, but as soon as it was day, I took him away with me.
Very nice. We meet every afternoon at 3:30. We sit in the one place where we can't be heard. A small back room just off Mrs. Sharp's bedchamber. Bare walls, bare floor. Just the two of us and a table and a tallow candle and an open book. And in this Spartan setting, free of any obligation, Mrs. Sharp greets the English tongue with the raptness of first love.
So that's how they write draws, is it? Nothing at all like doors. Oh, it's a silly language, it's frantic.
There is something so undistilled about her in these moments. One would never guess what heights of artifice she can otherwise scale. The buns and swags and tendrils of synthetic hair, the wreaths of imitation pearls, the Chinese brise fans, the giddy affected lilt that flies up from her throat every time a patron walks through the door. A voice like a drunken piccolo, high and girlish, but with no foundation, crashing down every few seconds in a raucous scrape.
Sir Edgar, it's too ecstatic. I don't think I've ever seen you looking so well. And there was I, thinking marriage would be the ruin of you, when here you are, ripe as a peach and handsome as a church. Your wife is to blame, I think. Oh, someone else? Well, whoever it is deserves a medal and a citation, and quite possibly a sainthood. Now, as I recall, you and Sadie had the loveliest chat when you came by last.
This is the public Mrs. Sharp. But here, cocooned in this dark, unventilated office that smells faintly of attar and night soil, she is illuminated in a different way. She runs her finger down the printed columns. She licks her lips clean of each word, and a smithy fire burns inside her. It taps something molten inside me. I think this must be how a father feels around his child. And then the inevitable, the tectonic shift occurs, and I find I am the father of a child. I am the father of that child. I am bending over her still form in the alley. I am trying to wrench her blood-stained fingers back to their natural shape. But the rigor mortis has frozen them into claws, and as I tug on them, they snap like icicles. And I leap back, but it's too late. Someone is screaming.
Mr. Timothy, are you all right?
Fine, thank you.
You look like someone walked over your grave.
I'm fine, thank you. That's what comes of my trying to imagine myself a father. Absurd. When not 6 months ago I was myself something of a child, uncompassed, wandering nameless streets, looking for who can say what. So much of it dissolves in the memory now, but I do recall strolling quite merrily down Charing Cross Road and stopping before a padding ken in 7 Dials and deciding that here I would stay the night. The mistress of the house wouldn't hear of it.
You'll find no private rooms here. Best try over by Drury Lane. There's a good man.
I told her I wasn't with the police. I told her my tuppence was as good as anyone else's. I told her I wouldn't leave until she gave me a bed, and I never once stopped smiling. A disturbing figure I must have cut, because the good woman did find a place for me in a room already crammed with a dozen others. I slept on a rag bundle. 15 minutes after I set my head down, a boy with no shirt tried to pick my pocket. 15 minutes later he went for my hat. Half an hour after that I found him very calmly unlacing my shoes. And sometime in the middle of the night I was awakened by the strenuous sounds of human congress, punctuated by a man's gruff voice. "Here, that's my wife you're fucking. It's my wife, ain't it? They argued for several minutes until the woman in question screamed,
Christ, will you shut your holes? I've got 3 more.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?